Well, I just hit record, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started.
Well, good. Good morning, everybody. I'm John McGuire. Logan and Danny have asked me to come and speak on some of the things that we do within the Amplify network and Brookside Laboratory network of consultants, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. But I want to make sure that I say thank you to Danny and Logan for giving me the opportunity. One thing I was just sitting here thinking, Logan, maybe I should stand up and close my door in my office just so that there's not a distraction. So give me 1 second here.
Yeah, I had to get up and go turn off the fan just so that wouldn't be heard.
Well, good. Then we both got a little edit that you can edit out of the final production. But no, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And one of the things, Amplify might be a new name for some of the people that are listening. You know, what has happened is the Brookside organization has always had a network of consultants associated with the laboratory. And over time, we've realized that we don't really have a good identity that we can all unify behind and underneath. And here in the last 12 to 18 months, we've undergone a branding process where the network of consultants, and that includes the guys from Greene Crop and the guys from Shelbyville Co-op, have basically created a brand called Amplify. And some of the words that the organization that we hired to help us do that branding work, some of the words that they came back with were spot on. And so what I've done is I've grabbed a few of the clips that they've given us, the talking points, and things I've highlighted in this second elevator speech, they call it, is, you know, the people that we're dealing with we're passionate about results, getting results for the clients. We're represented by a community of consultants and the laboratory. Those consultants are really good at sharing knowledge, but all of them remain independent business owners. So that means, although we have Amplify, Greene Crop and Shelbyville Co-op still remain their own independent businesses. They just have the opportunity to interact with a bunch of very knowledgeable and very open people who share their information and what they've learned. And 180 is what we list at the top up there of 180 agronomic consultants. I bet you that number's closer to 220 now. And we're really focusing on training and education. And what we're really doing is trying to maximize the output for the consultants and the clients that they work with. And it says yields, but you're going to notice as I go through this presentation that yield is one thing, but really profitability is where it's at. So again, this is a little commercial for Amplify. Amplify is, although it's new in name, it's really not new in concept because it's been around a really long time through the Brookside Consultant Network. We're trying to formalize it and put it into something that we can talk about, that you can hear a consistent message from. So I'm really excited about it. I think Danny, as a board of director, this is something that we've spent a lot of time on, and it has a lot of opportunity and upside. So what I think you guys invited me here to do today is basically, you know, put into action the words that are here. We're sharing information and we're trying to bring results that really can maximize profitability and soil health and all the other things that happen with an agronomist and their clients. Would you guys, anything that you guys would add?
You said it well, John.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm excited about this because I think there's a lot of upside potential. So, you know, one of the things too, and I'm going to quickly go through this, but simplified technology and what we're doing. You notice our logo, it's that arch look, and the basis for that arch logo really is, when I was a young guy with my parents, they took me to St. Louis and we went in the basement of the arch and we watched the video of them building that arch. And it always impressed me, the engineering that had to go into building two legs on such a precision to make a meet in the middle, that last piece, because of the heat that the two legs were seeing, they actually had to jack the legs apart to get it into place. So that, to me, that's what we do as a company. that's what we do, is to support the Amplify consultants, is people bring us those two legs, and then we help engineer to bring those two legs together in terms of a project, and in working together, we're creating a very strong structure. And I've asked our brand person that helped us do our logo to actually swap the colors on the middle piece, because I see that's us kind of sliding in the middle and adding different ideas. And in the branding process, when we talked about Amplify, you know, one of the things we had to do was create some core values, and these are the core values that we built our company on in terms of simplified technology. But all of the consultants that are out there have their own set of core values, and we find that there's enough overlap that's what really makes us strong. So I just wanted to spend a minute and just talk a little bit about that core values, because I don't think as an organization or as a group we spend enough time really talking about what we do well and the things that drive us. So I'm sure that Danny and Logan can share with the Greene Crops core values, and also Shelbyville Co-op's core values. So there's an open door for you guys so that sometime we get a chance, a customer says, hey, I heard that guy talk about core values in the presentation. What are your core values? I'm trying to open the door for you guys. So where we're located, we're Northwest Ohio. We just opened an office in Montpelier, Ohio. We've been in the precision ag business for quite a long time. Our goals, or the things that we really do, is help, you know, guys like Logan and guys like Danny and other people throughout the country to in their technology needs. We're focused highly on technology. Of course, after being around agronomists for 25 years, you tend to pick up a little bit of it. So when it comes to it, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in the field, but agronomy is something that we can slide in there and help guys with to a certain extent. So you know, what does a consultant do? Danny, what do you guys and Logan, if I were to try to lay into words what you guys do, I think the goal of what you're trying to do is collect the right information to identify and solve challenges related to agronomic conditions of your customers' farms, and basically help them identify those things that are holding them back. And then I think you're moving towards being able to enhance the chemical, biological, and physical conditions of the soil, and then ultimately is to offer new ideas that can produce positive outcomes. And I think in giving this talk in different places and having this conversation with farmers, chemical and physical has always been where we've gone to in terms of creating recommendations. And with some of the soil health tests and cover crops and some of the other things, I think we're finally getting a chance to address that third leg of that stool in terms of the biological. I would ask for your reaction, Logan or Danny. I mean, is there things that you would see that would support this, and additional things that you would think of that you're trying to do?
I would say, I mean, yeah, just to kind of touch on what you said earlier, right now, especially with a lot of like in-field scouting and late stuff like that, we do a lot of, I mean, I feel like a crime detective sometimes with all the stuff. You got to get all the information so you can point to the right stuff, and it's just a lot of that right now. And the biological stuff, like you were saying, it definitely is coming into focus with those advanced soil health stuff. And as we pull off higher and higher yields, I mean, guys are starting to see rapid degradation of soils and stuff like that. And adding in the biological element has really helped a lot of guys with their operations and improving profitability and all that kind of stuff, just from the little bit of evidence and reading that I've done.
That's great. No, Logan.
No, that's right. One of the things that I see is that, you know, one of our main goals is customer focus, absolute core values. And one of the things, how we try to address that is to look at the goals of each farmer, understand them as well as we can. And we know that some of them are agronomic, and we try to address them with the information that we have. And like you said, getting a soil test and understanding where we can go with this is the first step to understanding how we can help them move the needle on their own farm or their own operation. And so, yeah, we're trying to help help the farmers through what we're doing, but understand the chemical, biological, and physical conditions of the soil is a big step in that direction.
Yeah, yeah. Agreed, Danny. And I think that's important too, is that, and maybe that's another bullet point that needs to be added to this list, is it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
Because I think there is a lot of companies and programs out there that are designed to be a one size fits all. And I think any of your customers would attest that there's nothing in agriculture that, even from field to field or maybe even zone to zone within a field, that it's a one size fits all.
Right.
So, well, good. Yep. I appreciate your comments, and please let's make this more of a discussion. So slow me down if there's something you guys want to bring out. You know, you've asked me to kind of come and talk a little bit about data and technology, Logan, and what I want to do is, not that I want to throw a wet blanket on things in terms of technology and data, but I think a lot of people take for granted that they can immediately go and get to, you know, the flashy, neat new technology, and maybe pass by some easier things to address. And so, and I know that if you have a long-standing relationship with Green Crop or Shelbyville Co-op, chances are some of this basic agronomy that I'm going to talk about here in a second, you've already addressed, and you're ready to move on to the precision and the data part of it. But if you haven't, if you don't have that long-standing relationship, and you've you know, there's probably some opportunities on the table to get involved with Logan or get involved with Danny, to address some of the basic agronomy. And frankly, what I've seen is that's probably on a percentage basis a much larger return to handling things prior to getting to technology. And Danny or Logan, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in a stepwise process, I feel like guys really should be looking at their basic agronomy first, and then going and trying to get their arms around more of the data and that sort of thing. And I'm going to, in this presentation, I'm going to kind of lay out a plan that you could potentially follow. But I think the goal, you need to start with a goal. And I think first in that goal should be, let's address the basic agronomy. Let's get the things that are easy to fix fixed. And then let's go after some of the data part to be able to bring the next level of return. But I talked to a guy yesterday, and the comment I said is, you know, if pH is driving yields, or making yields swing 50 bushel, and you're doing some precision application that only, you know, makes the yield swing 10 or 5 or 10 bushel, if yield is swinging here, how do you ever know if you're getting that 5 or 10 you're after? You address that 50 first, and then come back and try to address the 5 or 10. So use variable rate technology because it maximizes profit and makes agronomic sense. And I think the first thing to do is you're looking at products and rates to address Lyme, P and K, and using data from site-specific soil tests. And then, you know, nitrogen and plant population and some of the other things out there. I think once you have your basic agronomy in place, that's when you can go out and potentially do some trials to understand what's right for your farm, and really probably what's right on an individual field basis. And ultimately, you're trying to maximize that profit in a measurable way so that you can say, you know, this is worth the investment because it's making me X number of dollars at the end of the day. And so my approach is, you know, first, you've got to have some sort of management pattern. You have to have a way of saying, these are the things that are driving yield within my fields, and then troubleshoot and try to improve those management areas. So again, Logan talked about being a detective. that's exactly right. So if you think of it in that perspective, Logan, you're establishing a crime scene with the management pattern, and you're using that yellow tape to tape off the crime scene. And then you're going in there and you're starting to collect clues about what's going on within that crime scene. That's where you're trying to troubleshoot so that you can come back and establish what happened in that crime scene. And ultimately, you want to get to the point where in terms of agronomy, your yield pattern is driven by things outside of your control. And ultimately, that's really Mother Nature. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But once that happens, once you see that repeatable pattern of yield in a field, that's when I think you're ready to actually move on and try to do a more precise level of management when it comes to data and technology. So, Danny, how many hundreds of thousands of acres have you done management zones on?
Oh, yes, definitely. We have all over the place. Yeah, from one border of Indiana to the other, and definitely in Shelby County too. Many. So we've covered the area.
Yeah. And ultimately, you're a management zone that's your foundation for your business is
Absolutely.
driving management zones, and ultimately you're using data that's either derived by the state or the farmer or Google, the aerial imagery. So how are you creating those patterns? You're looking for things that tell you about productivity. So good yield maps is something that a lot of people use, and I'm sure you guys do. Soil type data, imagery that comes from Google or imagery that comes from other sources. The state of Indiana has their LiDAR data set that can help you get elevation, or elevation could come from RTK steering systems on the farmer's tractor. But ultimately what you're trying to do is break that field up into areas, and my perception is, Danny, that you're trying to do exchange capacity, because exchange capacity affects so many of the inputs that you're recommending, and then yield pattern over time. So crop removal, those are the two main drivers that you're trying to get to with these management zones.
I'd add to that, when we can talk with the farmer and understand maybe a historical perspective of how that field may have been divided, where a fence line used to be. Sometimes we can find that on Google and sometimes we can't.
That's a great point. Farmer input should be another bullet point on this slide, because that is right. There's a certain amount of data that's locked up in a farmer's head that if you can get it down on a map, it's amazing what you can learn.
That's right.
So, and this is, if you've ever watched a Brookside presentation, probably you've seen those set of cores. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is get it to the point where when you take a core in the field, that you never see any two of those in the same zone, to any extent. There's always slight inclusions and that sort of thing, but in each zone, you're trying to break it up so that you see a multitude of those cores as you go through the zone. And Logan, you've probably run the four-wheeler across hundreds of thousands of acres, and you're our filter, or you're the filter that's saying we got a good zone job here, or we don't have a good zone job here, because of what you're seeing in that probe. So
yeah, I mean, it's always really satisfying whenever you can pull into a field and then you get done with it, and then you can look at your ice cream tubs like what we have, and you can see just how isolated and broken down all those soil cores are whenever you get done with the field.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's what goes into this bag is so vitally important to be correct, because it directly drives what comes on the sheet. When these numbers come back, if what's in this bag that represented those numbers isn't accurate, then probably there's very little chance that the numbers on the sheet are accurate. So it makes it that much harder to create a recommendation. So I hear farmers saying, or I hear consultants saying constantly that soil test is the foundation of everything else we do. So if it's not good, then everything else we do likely is not good.
Right.
So, and again, the idea being you zone the field, you get good sample results, you create a recommendation, and then the farmer follows those recommendations with variable rate. And again, this is for the guys, this is probably a good review, Danny, for some of your clients that have been with you for all the years that you've been in business. They're going, yeah, I've heard this 100 times, but it doesn't hurt to review it, because really there's so much opportunity to fix things here. That's the major swing that we're after.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the zone management over, say, just bulk sample management for a field makes so much sense. And yeah, Shelby County Co-op is in tune with that as well. So.
Yeah. And everybody's probably familiar with that old Liebig's law of minimum, right? That you get to the point where the barrel represents the lowest stave is your yield limiting factor, and I see guys try to represent that barrel across an entire field, but in my mind, what you're really after is in each one of those zones, you're trying to raise the lowest stave to get to the point where it's an environmental factor that becomes your limiting factor. And this goes back to what Logan talked about, being somewhat of a detective. You've got to be able to go out and assemble the right data to make the decisions to get to the point where environmental variables really are your limiting factor. And I don't know, does that picture represent what I'm trying to talk about? Because that's ultimately how I see it, is that you got several barrels in that field that you're managing, and so you've got to treat them all separately in order to get to the point where soil type and water really are become your limiting factors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what we see in almost every field that we work with. Almost never do we have one soil type in a field.
Yep. Yep. And ultimately, I hear people, and this is where I tell the story about, I've heard of farmers being frustrated when they see the same yield pattern in a field over time. And I think that comes from the perception of, by utilizing precision ag, and Logan, I'm going to test you here. By utilizing precision ag before coming to work for Green Crop or Shelbyville Co-op, what was your perception of spatial management of PK and lime? Let's see if it was the same as mine when I came out of college.
Yeah, it definitely, the professors and everything that you learned in college, it was always more so, well, with precision ag, we can flatline a field, we can make it all even across the whole thing.
Yes, you're telling the story exactly. So getting out of college, I thought, I went to work for Terra Industries, and grid sampling was in vogue, and we were going to go out and grid sample all these fields, and we were going to make them all one color, right? We were going to apply P and K and lime, and we were going to make them all one color. Well, here I am 25 years later doing talking to you guys about soil sampling. And if I would have been so good at making all these yield maps one color, would I still be sitting here? I would have made a heck of a lot of money, and I'd have been sitting in Florida sipping a pina colada, right? And so really, that is the perception, I think, of a lot of people within agriculture, is that by applying inputs variably across the field, I'm going to change a yield map so that it's all one high yield color. And unfortunately, there's a big stopper out there named Mother Nature that has placed things in our path that really don't allow that to happen. And so I think actually, if you look at the corn yield maps in this field and you look at the bean yield maps in the field, there's quite a bit of correspondence by crop in this field of the same pattern. And actually, that to me is a good thing, because what that tells me is we've probably nailed down the variables out there. We've looked at those barrels by zone, and we've knocked them all down to the point where what's controlling the pattern is no longer in the farmer's control. And really, this is the thing that's defining pattern out in that field. It's hills and valleys, it's water, and it's basically soil type as related to the hills and valleys. So on the left there, those are just some management zones. The black lines are the water flow off of the hills down into the valleys. On the right, you can see that's actually a normalized yield map where purple is high yield and red is low yield. And in this case, you've got, red is the tops of those clay knobs where water is moving away from, and in the valley is that little higher organic matter soil where water is moving to. And this field has been drained, so it's, water isn't excessive. So that's actually some of the higher yielding areas of the field. And why is it that we get the same yield pattern? It's because Mother Nature is controlling it. And so I had to steal that from somebody, trying to be like Pete Maybach, always throwing a joke in the middle of a presentation, right? So, and ultimately, when Mother Nature is dictating your production patterns, what do you do then? And that's really when I think that you've done well with Green Crop and you've done well with Shelby County, is they've done their job. They've actually got to the point where all of the controllable variables are accounted for and taken care of. And you'll never make your yield map one color, but by managing profitability spatially across the field, you potentially could even out your profitability map. And what I mean by that is, if you understand where you're spending dollars in that field, and what return you're getting on those dollars, you can actually say either increase yield in some of the areas and maintain your spending, or decrease spending, maintain your yield and get a higher profit margin. And I think ultimately that this is the farmer of the future is going to be making decisions across the field on a spatial basis based on the number of dollars and the risk to those dollars spent. I mean, Luke Baker joined us from Brookside. He's the CEO of Brookside Laboratories and part of the Amplify network. I mean, Luke, on a daily basis, what you're doing within the laboratory is that very thing, right? It's looking at profitability and making decisions of how money is spent in order to maximize return. We can't get him to talk, but he's nodding his head.
I was going to say, am I supposed to unmute and comment?
I was waiting for you to comment.
No, that's exactly, what we're trying, but that's any business actually. So, as a farmer, I mean, that's what you're doing, is trying to, make all your, it's not looking at yield maps, like you said. It's the first thing when you went to that slide before where you had the picture. That's exactly what I think. We were all taught that you were supposed to make the field one color and yield, but in reality, you're supposed to make the field all one color and profit loss is what you hope to do. And so we were missing a piece when we were in college 20 years ago and 25 years ago in some cases, maybe even more than that. But that to me is the piece that's missing, is you're basically operating your field like it's a business, and each of those zones is a separate little business within that field that you have to get a return on.
Yeah, exactly. It's the departments that are within the Brookside laboratory,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so how do you do it? Luckily, or over time, a lot of farmers have invested in technology that allows them to spatially manage and or collect data about different areas of their fields. And guys have variable rate capability on their planters. Guys have variable rate capability on their applicators and sprayers. And ultimately, we can come back using the yield data, maybe in some cases utilizing imagery, and measure the results of changes that we've created with the planter, the applicator, the sprayer, with the yield monitor. And really that's, if you think about it, having a consistent pattern, and Luke hit the nail on the head, if those areas out in the field are sub businesses, and I feed those sub businesses more or less input to measure the result on the output, I can do a better job of matching the correct rate to each of those environments. And that's when we get really, really good at that. That's where I think we can do a much better job of, instead of having a multicolored profitability map, we can make that profitability map closer to a single color. And so, you know, I'm going to give you a couple examples of some trials that we've done in the data analysis that we've been able to achieve. And so I'm bringing back this same field where we've done a nitrogen rate trial, and we've looked at the results across those environments. So we did nitrogen rates of 100, 150, 200, and 250 pounds in this field, total nitrogen. And we've broken it out on the analysis by low yielding environments. And you can see, you know, we're in the 160s to 170s in the low yielding environment. In the medium yield environment, so we're in the 180s. And then in the high yield environment, we're in the 190s to 200. And as you look at the response to nitrogen in those fields on an agronomic basis, you can see that in the low yield environment, so those are the clay knobs, you know, those are the low organic matter clay knobs. The more nitrogen that was applied, you're getting an agronomic response. In the medium yield environment, you know, so now we're headed down the transition of the hill from the clay knob down into the higher organic matter soil. You do see a response to nitrogen, but it tends to flatten off. And then in the high yield environment, there's not the response to nitrogen that there is in the two environments. 100 pounds, you know, is a little short compared to the others, but it's basically a flat line. And really cookie cutting out these environments, this is why it's important to have a stable yield map before you go to do this, because if you haven't taken care of the agronomic variables and see that repeatable pattern over time, this becomes very hit or miss as to where you define those environments of high, medium, and low. And so it's more difficult to do. You know, if pH was a problem in this field, measuring nitrogen would be quite a bit more difficult. So that's why it's important to think about those basic agronomy things and work with Danny and Logan to be that. How did you put it, Logan? The detective.
Yeah, the crime detective.
The Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's just, this is, and really this is the agronomic portion. What about the economic portion? So by doing this, and this is an older trial, so you'll have to, you know, bear with me a little bit on the prices we've used, but here's 67-cent nitrogen and 6 bushel corn, or $6 per bushel corn, but it doesn't matter. You can change those numbers based on the model we have here. I just didn't go back and do it, but notice, so what we've done on here is we've got the low yield zone, the medium yield zone, and the high yield zone. Here's our different rates of nitrogen, 100, 150. Here's our yield response. And then you can look and calculate your return to nitrogen here in the low yield environment. And when we do that, you can see that the maximum yield or the maximum profitability comes in at somewhere around 200 bushel per acre, or 200 pounds per acre. Well, if we know that there's 9.4 acres of that zone out there, we can do a comparison. Since we have a model, we can compare what the farmer's normal practices would have been of 200 pounds per acre versus the variable rate in of the 200 pounds per acre in this environment. Obviously, they're exactly the same in return. So in this case, the farmer's probably doing a pretty good job of choosing 200 pounds as his rate of nitrogen. But we come back and we start to look at these other environments where there wasn't the return to nitrogen, and you look at these yields, they're pretty much the same. So that means lower rates of nitrogen are going to be the most economic. Again, coming back. So here's the profitability on 200 pound. Here's the profitability on 150. When really the most profitable was 100, but try to get somebody to apply 100 pounds of N.
Right.
Not going to happen. So I threw another 50 pounds on it, knowing that they'll be a lot easier to get them to think about 150. And here in the high yield zone, again, the 150 is the most economic, but it's $1 more than that 100-pound rate. Come back and look at this at the 150. Here's what he gets. Over across the whole field, the return to N number at 200. So there's actually $900 per acre here, $1,000 per acre here, $20.64 more opportunity doing variable rate than the flat rate of 200. And again, this is, I'm not saying that everybody should go out and change their rate from their 200-pound rate to 150. What I'm saying is that by analyzing data this way, you get 2 or 3 years of information that's showing you what the right rate is. And by the way, you probably need to do this on all the different environments that you farm across. So if you know that you have 3 or 4 different major soil types that you're managing and 3 or 4 different weather regimes that you're managing, you probably should be doing this in those areas. After, again, think about it after you've already gone out and managed your basic agronomy. So Logan or Luke or Danny, is there anything that you would add that you see on this slide, or that maybe I've talked about in terms of nitrogen management that I haven't thought about?
So I guess I'd say that this is the general concept that you've shown here is very in line with what Bob Nielsen and Jim Camberato have shown, as far as it seems to be the lower yielding areas that require more nitrogen to produce a yield. And it's obviously still in that area, or that I think we're going to continue to see that in some of those more challenging areas, that's where you have to put more nitrogen down, and that's really contrary to our typical thinking. So I know this is, you're not trying to get into just specific this agronomic concept right now, but the thing is, it's a good thing to talk through and to test, and we would be glad to talk through that with you about your own fields, and maybe set up some of these tests, which don't take a lot of time and space. They can be done.
Yep. That's right, Danny. And again, that's the idea of having an applicator that's variable rate capable. You can actually build in and rely on the spatial relationship of data to apply and or collect yield information. So,
you know, John, what I found interesting on that is you actually do push yield
right
with higher rates.
You're right.
So when you have a farmer who's only looking at yields, or a producer who's only looking at yields, you're going to think that, oh, I applied 250 and look, I got 6 more bushel, or I got 2 more bushel, or I got 6 more bushel. What you have to get them to understand is to look at the cost of the nitrogen and what they're selling their corn for. That's because you really are pushing yield with more in that you put on, and you probably can continue to do that, you know, to a certain extent yet too, but it's really getting them to understand the numbers and having an idea what they're selling their corn for and what their other inputs cost as well.
That's great, Luke. Thank you for pointing that out. You're exactly right. So if I'm only yield driven, then 250 pounds is my right rate. Because basically I'm getting the maximum yield in each one of these environments using 250 pounds. It isn't till I go back and look at the economics that I start to change my thinking. That's a great point, Luke. Thank you for bringing that up. Because I think we lock ourselves as agronomists, as farmers and managers, I think we lock ourselves into thinking about yield way too much.
That's because when the farmers go to the coffee shop, that's what's your corn yield? What's your soybean yield?
Yeah.
That's all it is. My dad's a farmer, and that's what they talk about. I mean, and it's getting to flip the script. Okay, who cares about that, guys? How much money did you make? Is how much longer can you stay in business than your neighbors?
Yeah, exactly.
We do have one guy on here. Steve, do you kind of have anything to add about if you want to interject at any point, just don't be afraid to jump in. I guess if you have any thoughts on what we've been saying here, go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, for being here too. So, okay, Logan. So I'm gonna keep going. The other thing I want to talk about is seeding prescriptions. As an organization, we've done probably hundreds of thousands of seeding acres every year, and the foundation information of what we've done was originally a lot of guys were buying hydraulic drives and being able to do variable rate, and they were going out and grabbing a soil survey and changing rates within the soil survey without a lot of foundational information. And I was involved in a research project many years ago with Monsanto where we were actually looking at seeding rates and trying to define rate and environment and a lot of those things. And we actually made a little bit of, actually a fair amount of progress in terms of defining environment and seeing response to rate. And some of that work we've continued with seeding trials that we put together. So if you'll indulge me a little bit here, I'm going to talk through our process of creating seeding prescriptions. And one of the things that it's really foundational on is seeding rates has a lot to do with water holding capacity and matching the right population to the right water holding capacity. So if you have soil types and water regimes that lends themselves to being more of a wet area, you can actually in corn increase your population. And the opposite is true when you have a drier environment. You actually want to lower your population there. And if you think about it, you have a certain amount of water, a water budget that you could build a plant from and build an ear from, and you're trying to match that water budget to the to the right rate. And in beans, it's actually opposite. You flip it. You do high rates on the low water regime, and you do low rates on the high water regime. But water, if you think about it, topo is something that's ubiquitous. Everybody has a good topo map potentially on their fields, and that was one of the fallback things that we found, is that topography relates to so many things in a field, that if you can get a good topo map and you can make the right ancillary variable out of the topo map, you can represent soil type and you can represent yield potential on a very large number or very high percentage of the acres that are out there. So we've built several tools within the software we use where we can actually do local highs and local lows. So it's not the fact we don't go in and say, well, this is the top of the hill, so this needs a lower rate, and this is the bottom of the hill, so it needs a higher rate. Because any farmer that's ever walked from point A to point B across the field, they've gone up these little hills and they've gone down these little valleys, and they've seen the result of that water movement over the millions of years, that this area is darker, this area is brighter, this is where the water is, this is where the water isn't. And that's really what our model is built to do, is define those local highs and local lows. And here's that same field now turned on its side, and you look at the bare soil image overlaid on top of that hill, and here's the high spot up here, right? And here's the low spot down here. You don't see that this is the light textured soil and this is the dark textured soil. What happens is this is the light textured soil on top of this little rise, and down here in this valley, you start to see the dark textured soil. And so what's happened over time is over millions of years of water movement, this is where the organic matter material didn't completely decompose, and you've got a little higher organic matter, probably a little finer textured soil. Up here it could potentially be coarser, and that's what we're defining on and relying on as we're making seeding prescriptions. And basically it comes back to what other variables respond like that. Well, here's the yield map over time. Here's the normalized yield data. On top of those hills, you see low yield. In the valley, you see the high yield. We see this consistently. You look at an image from actually collected this year. This is a drone image. You can see where's the crop senescing. This was collected about a week or so ago. Where's the crop senescing? Where is it staying alive? There's just a lot of response to the tops of the hills and the bottoms of the hills. We feel really good about making seeding prescriptions that are showing those low spots and high spots. And ultimately what we're really after is on those hills, we want that low corn population. In this medium environment, we're looking for a medium corn population, and down here in the valleys, we're looking for that high population. And here's the actual seeding prescription we used on that field, that on the tops of those hills, we're lowering the population. In the bottoms of the valleys, we're actually raising the population. So something to keep in mind, that if this is any of interest, what I tell guys is, I felt like when they were creating seeding prescriptions based on soil texture, they were doing variable rate because they could. They basically had a hydraulic drive. The company that sold them the hydraulic drive gave them the ability to pull up a soil map and plug rates into those different soil textures, whether those rates or whether those areas were actually defined well spatially or not. And so we felt there was a lot of value in being able to actually apply some science behind the population to the matching the right population to a good base data set.
And John, one of the reasons that that you have the lower population on the higher elevations, quite often in the clay soils, what that holds, that doesn't absorb moisture and hold it well for the crop, then it doesn't release it well for the crop either. So spacing those plants out allows each plant to get the amount that it needs a little bit better and produce a viable ear for some yield.
That's right, Danny. You're right. That if that clay knob is shedding water and then not giving up that water when the plant needs it, you're exactly right. It's water regime, water management.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing, just going back to what Danny talked about, in addition to doing those variable rate seeding prescriptions, and you can see here's an actual prescription map where the tops of the hills are red and the bottoms of the valleys are blue. We get the guidance line and or historical planting map and create a layout where the farmer can actually test those rates that we're placing in those different environments and look at them by environment in the fall. And in the planter, all they do is drive. This is built directly into the prescription for them. We usually do a high, medium, and low rate. And so in each one of those strips, we put the high, medium, and low rate, and then we're able to test those rates. So we would have a high population on top of the hill, and we would have a low population in the valley. And we'd be able to come back and say, well, if you'd have done the low rate in the valley, here's what you would have gotten. If you'd have done the low rate across the hill, here's what you got. So you can actually validate those prescriptions over time. You got to pay attention to variety, and you got to start looking at varietal lines more than you have to look at the actual variety itself. You can use guidance from the seeding or from the companies, the seed companies themselves, to help you target those populations. And in a lot of cases, what we're doing is running populations in our strips above the recommendations and below the recommendations to see if the seed companies actually has a good handle on the environment that you're farming. And ultimately, our goal is to create a model where we can build a response curve for population to both yield and economics. So here's a situation where in the low ground, we ran populations from 29,000 up to 39,000, and we were able to achieve yields, you know, in that 190 some. The yield peaked out somewhere around 34,000, but at a seed cost of $275 a bag and 450 corn, you know, your maximum return, coming back to what Luke talked about, is somewhere around 33 or 32.5. So it's basically, this is your economic report to say, you know, although the seed company's telling me to plant 35,000 or 34,000 to maximize yield, with the costs I'm facing, economics are telling me that I probably need to be a little lower than that. So, and so now you not only do you have where to apply, by using a model like this over time, you can actually how much to apply. In the medium ground, okay, so now we're dropping to the 170 environment. Again, still 33, 34,000 probably is your maximum yield potential there, but economics really start to separate here, where you probably want to be planting somewhere around 31,000. And again, it's the idea that if I'm paying $3 a thousand out there, I really want to be maximizing that $3 per acre in each one of the environments. And guess what? In the high ground, you know, out there where basically what Danny just talked about, that clay knob, where water is a huge limiting factor, 29,000 wasn't low enough, because we never found the backside of that curve. We never saw yield start to degrade because our population was too low. So in this case, your maximum return is your lowest population. And you can put that into the same kind of economic model where you compare it to what the farmer normally would have done with a flat rate across, you know, planting 32,000 in the low ground versus 34, you're going to give up a little bit of yield, 2 bushel per acre, but you're going to gain $2 per acre. So again, not a huge gain, but there's opportunity there. 31,000 versus 34,000 in the medium environment. And again, there's $5 per acre there, but really and we really need to still continue to push lower populations, but 29,000 at 150 bushel per acre versus 34 at 143, you can see that we've overpopulated at 34,000. So we spent what, another $5, so $15 on seed, and we've lost yield by putting that 34,000 out there. So the opportunity probably most of all is in that high environment, and understanding what the right population is where I have low water regime. And so it's a matter of getting to the point where you understand the economics versus just the yield out there. That makes sense, because I'm going to shift gears here. Is there anything else that you guys would comment on in terms of economic management? And by the way, it's all in vogue, right, to talk about profitability, a profitability map. Really, this is the foundational, this economic analysis is really the foundational information of having a profitability map. I tell guys all the time that a profitability map looks just like your yield map if you're not using some sort of variable rate out there. And so to spend a bunch of time trying to get to a profitability map is probably not have a lot of value if you don't change rates across the field. Your profitability, I'm not saying profitability is not important. What I'm saying is that you probably need to understand profitability at the field level first before you try to dive in and do it at the zone or even maybe at the per foot level. And having some way to test and look at that change over time with data that's something like this, where you can say it's a model and I can plug in, if I do this, this is what I get. If I plug in this, this is what I get. Having a model like this makes profitability and decision-making so much more valuable, in my opinion. So I'm going to shift gears. You guys got any other comments that you might bring up?
You're doing great, John.
Okay. Data ownership. Logan, you asked me to talk a little bit about data ownership. I guess I'd be curious, what was your thought process in asking me to mention or bring up data ownership?
I don't know. It's kind of a hot topic issue right now, and it seems like every time you open something up, you've got a user agreement that's the 3,000 pages long, and you aren't sure if you should actually read it, so you just click yes.
Amen.
And you don't know really what that says, what it means. So kind of just, I was thinking there might be some benefit to potentially doing some due diligence and just looking into, I mean, knowing what a company's interests are and beyond just providing a service to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think your comment there of well, number one, it's much easier just to hit accept versus trying to really understand what's all the mumbo jumbo in that user agreement. I think we're all guilty of hitting I accept, right? But I think it's important that you understand what you're doing. The second thing is that I think that a lot of guys are accepting those user agreements to get something in return, right? There's some value that they're trading potential user rights over for something in return. And I think it's critical that they understand what they're trading in return. And I think of things like, the precision cloud. I think of the Deer cloud. You are giving access to your data potentially in return for the ease of logging and retrieving data from the cloud. You just need to make sure that what you're allowing somebody else to do with your data is equal to the return you're getting back for that. And so the main thing I see that guys are doing with Deer and Precision is it's basically it's a wireless transfer of data from the field to the office. And I don't know if that's all that cracked up, if it's worth allowing somebody else to look over your shoulder. And one thing I think that people get confused on is that data itself really doesn't have a heck of a lot of value. The data itself doesn't have a tremendous amount of value. It's what is learned from the data that has the value. And what I mean is that you can read a user agreement and it can say at any time you can remove your data from our system. Well, that's fine, but if they've already gained the value by sifting through the information and finding what they were after, that intellectual property that's gained by sifting through the data is what stays with the company. And I think my point in saying that is you need to be sure you really trust the company and you understand. This goes back to core values. Do you really understand the core values and the ultimate goal of that company that you are allowing to sift through your data? Are you comfortable with what they are going to do with that? And that, to me, that's the biggest question people should be answering before they hit that I accept button is yeah, I trust the company I'm working with. I think what they're trying to do will actually promote what I want to happen on my farm, but in a larger sense, what I want to happen with agriculture in general, because that's the amount of data that's being generated and traded is going to affect not only you, but it's going to affect our industry to a large extent. And as long as the people that you're trusting with the data that you're collecting and making available to them, you trust that company that they're going to be a good steward of that data, then I don't have any problem with you hitting I accept. But I would encourage people to spend a little bit of time before they just, yep, I'm going to do it. Do I really think that what that company or what that group is going to do in terms of agriculture is the right thing for us as a whole? Because we're all subject to what's going to be learned from that information and the tools and the methodologies that are going to change over time as a result. So I think it's a matter of trust. I think it's core values and trust. So I, I'll step off of my little soapbox and ask you guys for a comment. So you guys are all asleep now, so.
I think you made a lot of good points there. John, do you know of any companies out there that kind of just do, I think I remember one, it was a legal company, they never really, they just take user agreements sort of, and then they just review them. They kind of break it down into simpler terms. They do a lot of that due diligence work, and then they kind of give you the key points. Do you know of any?
You know, I have never looked out on anything like that, Logan, but that's actually, there was a couple lawyers that were blogging for a while, like with Farm Futures, I think, the Farm Futures magazine, they were blogging. I wonder if they're still out there. And I do remember they had talked about data ownership at one time or another, but I don't know if there's companies out there that summarize user agreements.
I think I remember one, and I think I remember hearing about it, but it's something that it was so obscure so long ago, I couldn't even think of what to even search to find the company. So I didn't know if you knew of anything or if anybody else did.
Yep. I don't, unfortunately, that'd be a good thing to follow up, maybe do some Googling. So last point here, I want to talk briefly about data aggregation, you know, because one of the things that Amplify has gotten involved with here in the last several years is the Nutrient Star program. And Nutrient Star is a program that was developed to really aggregate information, whether that's university trials, whether that's farmer trials, whether that's company-led data. What we're going to do with it within Amplify is through this program, as consultants like Danny and Logan go out and do field trials, we're hoping that we can lend a hand in terms of the design of those trials. We've got some people that are statisticians that can help us make sure that the randomization and replication and the treatments are designed in such a way that they can stand up to statistical rigor so that we can really rely on the results when they come back. But in addition to that, in addition to design, we're hoping that there would be the opportunity to take the results and aggregate those results or combine those results with other consultants and other farmers' data in the country that have adhered to the same protocols in terms of the design and implementation of the trials, so that we can find the consistency of the results, so that we can offer back a much larger data set than any one farmer or any one consultant could produce on their own. And what that allows you to do is look at multiple weather regimes, look at multiple soil scenarios, just a lot of different things that you can glean out of the results that could add value and hopefully increase the speed of learning. And ultimately, Nutrient Star can then produce those results in an aggregate form, offer that back to the consultants and the farmers that participated, so that they can see and understand what other guys are doing and what results are coming. And we've actually been doing this for several years. Part of the program originally was to evaluate nitrogen rate models, and I got an example here from 2017. Each one of the black dots on the map there is a field trial, and you can see that we went anywhere from Missouri up to the Bay Area of Michigan, and including some of the trials that Green Crop and Shelby County helped us produce here in central Indiana. So basically, this is an example of aggregated trials, and the idea being that, okay, so here's the results of the nitrogen rate model versus the farmer rate across 3 particular years. And as I don't really want to spend a bunch of time going into it, but if you look at those results on that slide, what you'll learn very quickly is the consultant-led choosing of a farmer rate was superior to the nitrogen rate model on a very consistent basis. And so one of the things that we found over time, because of consultants practicing really good basic agronomy, we're able to produce these field trials at a much higher quality level than a lot of the other companies that are out there are doing this, because of that laboratory data and good agronomic decisions being made and farmers following those agronomic recommendations. We're actually, going back to what we talked about, we're choosing fields where the basic agronomy is already taken care of, and we're very good at laying in strip trials and being able to produce a higher quality result than the average person out there. So the data set that's coming back from our Nutrient Star / Amplify consultants is a very, very good and reliable product. So ultimately, and this is my last slide. I don't know how I have any idea how long I've talked for, but ultimately, Amplify, Brookside, and Nutrient Star are here to support, green crop and Shelby County for sure. But then also, if the clients of those two entities ever need any support, we're here to help them as well. So I want to make sure you have my contact information. Here it is, and Luke or Danny and Logan. I've done a lot of windbag talking here. I hope I met your expectations. But I would invite you to comment on what we've gone into here and add anything that you think is important.
Hey, John, back up a slide once real quick. One thing that you and I also, and one more slide maybe even, I don't know. One thing you and I always talk about is junk in, junk out, and data. And so you have all these programs out there or people out there like, hey, we'll take your data and we'll aggregate it and produce something. But the problem of it is you don't know where that data is coming from. So if the fields haven't been managed agronomically in a way, like you said, we were able to produce these trials and at a very high level and actually get results. If you had a field where you did adapt in on and it was managed poorly on the agronomic side, that's just junk data. And it means nothing. So when these companies are ingesting data, they don't sift through whether it's good data or bad data. It's just data, and they're engulfing it all. And the only issue that I have is they're making product decisions off of that data. So, okay, well, we're seeing this, so we're going to ingest that. This is telling us we need to go down this road and research this product, and then that's something else they're going to sell you. So my point on the data is always be careful that you're getting some sort of value out of that data. And it's not this bundling stuff either. I hear that also. We're like, well, if you enter your data, we'll give you your seed $20 a bag. Well, you know what? It's like MSRP, right? They're making a killing off of you, whether you give you $20 off a bag of corn or their herbicide program or whatever it is. They're still making a killing off of you, and you're giving them up the information to produce the next product that they're going to charge more for you on. So again, bundle it. No matter however you're looking at it, they're making money. Yeah. And they'll continue to do that. And we need them to continue to develop products and stuff, but we just need to make sure that the data going in is good data so that the decisions on these products are good decisions, and then that ultimately that the farmers are benefiting at the end of the day. Exactly. That's the only thing I wanted to say, so I'll shut up now.
I think you're spot on in terms of, are the core values that the person that you're getting into that relationship with, do they align with your core values?
Mm-hmm. One other thing with Nutrient Star, what I understand is that you, as products are evaluated, if there's so many products that are brought to a farmer, the farmer asks us, is this a good one? Should I be using this? We don't have any idea if we don't have any data, and especially if we don't have data that we can trust, that we haven't ever examined on our own or through a third party that is unbiased. And so to have a third party unbiased group helping to organize some testing across a wider geography, we're going to learn a lot more than we are from just a testimonial, for instance.
That's excellent, Danny. That's an excellent point that we all forgot to bring up. So it's exactly right too. And like you, then on top of that, it's done in trials that you know that are done right. That's the important.
Right. So if somebody does have a product that they're interested in, and they think that the company would be willing to test it to prove that, or to at least allow it to be looked at, then they need to get that company together with Nutrient Star, and we can help out with that on our end.
That's exactly right, Dan. Yeah. I think Green Crop becomes or Shelby County becomes the gatekeeper there, and becomes the kind of helps navigate that relationship.
Yeah, and the farmer, you know, you can let us know. We can make sure we can do the test on your farm.
Absolutely.
We'll help you pull it together if the company's willing to support that.
Yep. It's a great point. Logan, so when you asked me to speak, was this kind of what you had in mind?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head for my vision, and really actually gave me a couple points to think about whenever I go over my stuff that I kind of put together later on. Just that basic agronomy thing. That's one thing that's really hard to get guys to drive home. Is we can spend $500,000 on a planter, but if we aren't making sure, or we can spend $500,000 on whatever we want, but if we aren't making sure that we're using that money right and doing our due diligence to do the simple things, I mean, the simplest things can throw the biggest wrenches into the most complex systems.
Agreed.